I would like to read to you the story Enemy Pie. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. You see, it was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when I struck out in the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend Stanley was invited. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed. Have you ever had an enemy? You ever had someone that just rubbed you the wrong way? It seemed like they were always against everything that you wanted to do, or made you feel like you were the odd one out, or just made you plain out feel bad? Keep listening. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of his enemies. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, very satisfied. You may be wondering what exactly is enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was a secret. He couldn't even tell me. I decided, it must be something pretty good. And I begged him to tell me something. Anything, Dad, just tell me anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of your enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head no. I brought him some earthworms and rocks, but he said he didn't need any of those. I gave him the gum I had been chewing all morning. He just gave it right back to me. So it left me wondering what could be in enemy pie. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what would it look like? But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen, and I started to be a bit confused. What could Dad be cooking up in the kitchen that smells good for an enemy? I went in to ask Dad, "What's wrong, Dad? Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good." But see, Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell Dad had made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang, ding, and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. Ha! I was catching on. But still, I wasn't quite sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly does it do to my enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath smell really stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. I wonder what his job would be. Dad said, there is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not going to be easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this, Jeremy? Not Jeremy. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with my enemy? Then he'll be out of my hair for the rest of my life? Ha, sure. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. Wonder what's going to happen. Will his enemy play with him? What you think? You think he will?
I think he's going to play with it, and I know.
Let's see. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something, but I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. This is getting interesting. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that, since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game just to be nice. So it seems like they're having a good time together. Having a good time with your enemies? Interesting. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. You know what's in the treehouse. Remember what's in the treehouse? My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her in. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him in. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in? Jeremy asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. Let me go up and do something first. I climbed up ahead and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games, and we had fun until Dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him. And when he came up to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow he found us. But what is Dad preparing in the kitchen? He's preparing enemy pie, right? Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner. My favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick pieces. Dad, I said, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention, trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled. Yeah, friend. Ha ha. I think he thought I was just pretending. Oh no. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me. He passed one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pies like this. It was at this point that I started to panic. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend now. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. I don't know. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asks, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad, and sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff. This is good. As he had a mouthful of pie. And that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was eating happily. And neither of them was losing any hair. It didn't seem like they were being poisoned. And their breath didn't stink. It seemed safe enough. So I took a tiny little taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or if their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer because I just lost my best enemy. I love this story because it teaches us exactly what Christ teaches us. When we love our enemies and we do good to those who hurt us, we do good to those who persecute us, or even if we just take the time to be nice to someone who has always shown mean behavior towards us, we can make a difference for those individuals. So think of enemy pie. Think of an enemy and think of a way that you can be a blessing to them. And it's definitely possible that that enemy could no longer be an enemy anymore.